Hello, good afternoon. Happy New Year. Check on the mic. Is it sounding all right? I saw that there are one people's that liked it and one people's that's here. So if you're the one people's that's here, if you could just like hit the heart button or just say I can hear you if you can so that I know and I'll type it in there too. Just because I do seem to have a lot of problems with things coming unplugged and stuff. Not like Nirvana unplugged. That would be good. But yeah, a podcast unplugged, not so good. Let's see. Make sure these are all plugged. Things just get loose. It's really annoying. So it's terrible when you think it's plugged in and then it tells you that your battery's low and then it cuts you off. So let me see. I'm just going to type in here. And then we'll get busy. So everything I say is simply my opinion for the sake of hoping to start a conversation, learn something, be educational. All my videos are made for YouTube. It's an entertainment platform. I'm wearing my Navy hat today, both in honor of my son, who's active duty, and in honor of Jimmy Carter, who, as you probably well know, served our nation in the military. He went back to farming, back to the peanut farm when his father passed away, and he was like on the trajectory to be an admiral, and he gave all that up just to take care of things. I don't know how much most people remember about Jimmy Carter. I was a kid when he was elected, and I remember that he did not own a pair of shoes until he was 10 years old. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school. I almost cried when I said that. First person in his family to graduate high school, you guys. He didn't get a pair of shoes until he went to school. That's when he was 10 years old. So he was, it makes him sound very poor. They were landowners, so they couldn't have been that poor. But, he's from a town of 600. 600! That's pretty wild. That's a pretty freaking small town, even smaller than Truckee. So I have to ask you to make sure you're still subscribed. If you are subscribed, and if you're not, please consider doing so. It really helps me out. Oh, we have 4 people. Can anybody hear me? Can you let me know? Let's see. Share a video of mine with somebody that you think might like the channel, and turn on your notification bell to ring, because I'm kind of random when I come onto my lives. I try to be consistent, but it's just one thing after another, and I don't like to complain. I always love to say, if that's my biggest problem, then how lucky am I? I feel very, very fortunate. I have a lot of gratitude for having viewers, for having a channel, for having this creative outlet. It's really amazing to find your voice, basically, is what I feel like I did the minute I started this YouTubing thing. So I highly encourage anybody who hasn't tried it yet, if you're interested, to give it a try. I was able to break the ice by being a special guest star on What's the Obsession, talking about like the mental health slant of Chris Watts and NK. I'll see if I can find that and put a link to it in the description. I love to link things up in the description. I don't know how many people look at them. Bees, I almost called you Annie Ruler. I have missed you and like to chat with you and everyone. Oh, you're so sweet. Well, I've seen you like in Shane's live, and then didn't you come in at the end yesterday? I have to be honest, it's all a blur. It's very hard to remember things short term, right? Long term is much easier. Anyway, how are you, and Happy New Year, my dear? Thank you so much for saying hi. So now I know that you can probably hear me. Otherwise, you'd be like, no sound, no sound. So I'm just going to go with it. So let's just start with the Kiely Rodni thing, Anna Bees. The gaslighting is so extreme. Yes, I came in the end. Okay, cool. The gaslighting is so extreme pretty much in all of these cases. Like, that's the problem with our mainstream media, is that it's full of lies and half-truths, which are lies, and gaslighting. And people have had enough of it. And I believe that that's why this type of format is gaining so much traction and popularity, especially right now, but over the years since YouTube, it was started in like the early 90s, wasn't it? Isn't that about right? Somewhere in the 90s. I remember I had a friend who was obsessed with it, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just so cool. You can just like watch endless videos of whatever you want." And I'm thinking, "Well, what would you want? Like, you know, true crime?" I used to watch all of those investigative discovery types of channels and shows, and Homicide Hunter and 2020 48 Hours, you name it. I love those shows. One of my favorites, I haven't mentioned it in forever. Do you guys remember one called City Confidential? And I love it so much because they go into the history of the city where the crime takes place. So they go way back to like when, you know, 200 years basically, when the land was taken over from natives, essentially. I think that's normally where the story starts. And then they come up to present time, and then they tie the crime in with something real pivotal from the history. And there we go. Oh, they need to do one on Truckee, right? With the whole Donner Pass. Wouldn't that be incredible? Maybe I need to do it, right? Okay, there's my documentary right there. I'm going to do my own little Truckee Confidential. Don't tell anybody. Since we only have 3 people watching right now, it's okay. It'll be secret. I'll put it on members only, which I only have like 4 members, maybe. I'm not sure. But I appreciate each and every one of you, whether you're a member, whether you're just a lurker, whether you're on replay crew, or whether you're active here like Anna Bees. So yeah, let's talk about the Kiely Rodni gaslighting. So why was it not until today? And again, sometimes I can't remember. Like maybe I did think about this over the last 2 years, 2.5 years. This morning I thought, okay, Elsa came in with her story late to the game, right? And she said, "Oh, I've got a secret to tell you. Kiely fell down in a hole when she was walking around at the party, and nobody knows because it was so dark. Me and my boyfriend were the only ones that saw. We helped her get up, helped her dust herself off. She wasn't really hurt, and she said she didn't need any help, and she just kept on going." That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And then I'm gonna guess, I don't remember exactly again, but I'm gonna guess that MC Ultra came out to bolster her story, because that was pretty much her job on the streets of YouTube, was to bolster anything that they wanted to sell. You know, like a mouse at a grocery store, in a house, or the friendly fight. All right. So that fall in that hole, I think, has a lot of meaning. And exactly what the meaning is, I'm not going to claim that I know for sure, because, again, I wasn't there. I can only speculate and get creative in my imagination with the hints and the clues that are dropped, and trying to put it all together. And they sure do make it hard with all their crazy shenanigans. When you're trying to ungaslight yourself, you just get overwhelmed, and you sound like the crazy one when you're trying to break down what they're saying. You know who's really good at it? A lot of people are really good at it, but in particular, Ninja True Crime. She's been doing that with the Madeline Soto case, and it's painstaking to iron out the story, to pin these people down, and to say, wait, if you said it's up, then how can it be up at the same time that it's down, right? And again, you sound like the crazy one, because everyone's like, everyone knows that up and down are opposite. So what are you talking about? People don't really pay attention. People don't want to think the worst of everybody. You know, we want to try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, Anna Bees, MC is such a terrible person, isn't she? And I wanted to talk about another terrible person, because I sometimes try to not go there, but I think our president-elect is downright evil. And I wanted to go over the statements that he made about Jimmy Carter on his social media posts, because those were vile, in my opinion. They were a little discreet in their vileness. He didn't come out and say direct, straightforward, hateful things, but it was, I want to break it down with you again because I was looking at it more, of course, after my live yesterday. Oh, what's the word? Consequential. His presidency was very consequential. That's a negative word. That's not like to say, oh, he made a great impact. That's to say he caused trouble. I mean, you don't enjoy the consequences of your actions, do you? You suffer the consequences of your actions. So he also misused the word I. Can you believe it? Like, I know Clinton did that with is. Like, it depends how you define is. And I was just like, okay, Clinton, you lost me. If you hadn't lost me before, you lost me now, trying to split hairs over how you define is. But President-elect misused the word I, and I will break it down for you. Oh no, what did that man say now? I don't think he's made any other posts than those first two. But, I've always wondered how the politics plays in with Truckee, California, because California is a very liberal state, right? And I can only imagine that the administration of the city of Truckee is very conservative. Most cities, even if they are a liberal city, have very conservative governments. But my guess has always been that Scammy's family are huge, huge red supporters, MAGA. And I don't know. For all I know, the Kiely Rodni family, the Neiman Rodneys might be also, but it's kind of hard to see that with Lindsay and Tony and with Kiely. So, there was so much political division, especially with COVID and the mask wearing and the vaccines. I can't imagine that didn't play into the whole underpinnings of the story and how things were evolving up until she allegedly went missing. And I don't believe anything Scammy says. I think that Scammy is lying if her lips are moving. If she's talking, she's lying. And, the term talking out of both sides of the mouth, when you say one thing and then you immediately contradict yourself, but you stick to your guns and you're like, yeah, yeah. Both are true, even though that's impossible. So, yeah, the whole thing with Elsa. And then Elsa was a freaking niece of Zanime. I'm about 100% sure that was something that some of the sleuths dug up. Maybe it was Sleuthy Goosey. I don't know if it was Ara or Shan. Does anybody remember who dug that up? That Elsa was Zanime's niece. Interesting, huh? Again, this is a small town and everybody knows everybody. Sam Brown went way back with the Rodney Neiman family. There were pictures of him at that cabin 20 years prior. And whoever owns the town, whoever runs the show can pretty much make or break anybody. Hold on. Hey, I'm live. Bye. So I even texted and said, I'm going live in 5. I remember about Sam Brown. Yeah. So, Kate Cunio's uncle, David Cunio, was a property owner in the area. He's also a sheriff's deputy for Sacramento County at the time of this. Kate Cunio's grandmother was an Olympic skier. I think she was a downhill racer or a ski jumper, but she was an Olympic skier. That has a lot of clout. So Kate Cunio's kind of like your little, I like to say Kennedy when I mean local royalty, kind of the local Kennedys. Oh, you don't remember that, Anna B's? See, this is why I try to dig up all of the things out of my brain for people that might have forgotten or people who didn't know that. So yeah, Kate Cunio's uncle, direct uncle. I don't know, brother of the mom, brother of her dad. But remember, Kate Cunio was like 5'11". She was probably the only one there taller than Mags. Mags was really tall too, tall and skinny. Like that girl didn't eat. And I'm not trying to be mean, but that girl had to be abusing some meth when her face broke out overnight so bad it looked like she had like flies all over her face. And I remember some trolls trying to attack me for like, oh my goodness, how can you criticize a young woman's complexion? And it's like, well, because her skin was fine one day and then it was like so not fine the next day. It was amazing that she even came out in public. But again, that's where Scammy's powers probably overrode her desire to stay home and let her picking heal up, right? I agree about Mag. She was using, well, and she's so freaking skinny. You can't be that skinny without having anorexia or maybe rug abuse, in my opinion. I mean, she was so freaking skinny. She was like half the size, the width of Scammy. She was even skinny next to Kiely, and Kiely was extremely slender, extremely slender. But she had a lifestyle that lended itself to that, living out in, what do you call it, out in the sticks, living off grid like that is a very active lifestyle indeed. It's almost like being a professional athlete. So yeah, we have that law enforcement there with Kate Cunio. We've got the thing that I was talking about yesterday with the twins, Matthew Stanio, who is the patrolman for the California State Highway Patrol. He was a trooper. And then his twin brother, Christopher Stanio, who was stepfather of Trinity Backus. I always like to remember to mention that Trinity Backus's mom, Andrea Stanio, had just moved back in with her ex-husband, Chris Stanio, a couple of weeks before Trinity went missing. And Trinity lived with her mom. So was Trinity living at Deputy Stanio's house when she went and had her sleepover at her fake Auntie Ashley, and then the whole thing happened? But Christopher Stanio was boots on the ground at Kiely Rodney's search party. And I've seen it. I've seen the receipts. I can't find the receipts. They've probably been scrubbed off the internet because I have dug and dug and dug, and I'm sure other people have too, like Squirrels on Fire. She really wants to find that information. But I remember specifically that it was verified that Chris Stanio helped with the search for Kiely. And then 3 months later, his own stepdaughter goes missing with the same fate as Kiely. And then you can't tell me it's a coincidence with Sunshine Fowler and her son, Francis Fowler. I've never known definitively if Francis Fowler was at Kiely's thing or if he knew Kiely, but of course he knew Kiely. Sunshine and Lindsay were dear friends, and they were both like priestesses of their little CULT or whatever, right? Kiely was athletic. Right. She did a lot of cross-country skiing, which is even more athletic than the downhill skiing. Crazy coincidences. Yeah. Yeah. And then what other law enforcement? There was Wayne Wu's son, Nathan Wu, was allegedly at the party. Remember, Kiely went missing 10 days after Wayne Wu was sworn in. Wayne Wu had a history of statutory rape that he admitted to, because then he denied that he knew she was 16 when she was an explorer. So he's doing it on company time. It wouldn't matter if she was twice that age. It wouldn't matter if she was older than him. But the fact is, when someone's an explorer, you're going to have all of their like FBI files to allow them in the department and in the car and all that. So he knew how old she was. But if he's going to deny that he knew, he still admitted to the illicit activity, and he also forced her to terminate a pregnancy, I do believe. I mean, that's pretty vile. That's as bad as R. Kelly and Aaliyah. And again, it took, I think, 28 years for R. Kelly to really suffer any consequences of his actions with Aaliyah. There's that word again, consequential. So, so back to the thing with Elsa coming out with this BS story about falling in the hole, and no one else knew because, oh, it was so dark. It's pretty effing bizarre. And have we heard that 911 call? I think we did hear Lindsay's 911 call, right? When she first put on the record that her daughter was missing. We haven't heard the 911 call in the Idaho 4 case, and I would imagine that we never, ever will, not even in a trial. Yeah, I'd like to hear the 911 call in the Martha Moxley case, because they didn't know what a horrible outcome that was going to have. They probably had a feeling what a horrible outcome it was going to be, because Martha Moxley, like Kiely, was very responsible, and she had a curfew of, I think, 9:30-ish, and that's when it happened, was when she was trying to go home, basically. And isn't that the story that you gather with Kiely Rodni, is that it happened when she was trying to go home, whatever it is? And they both were like hanging out at parties with friends. Oh my goodness. And the whole thing with the wiffle ball bats, you guys, that story with the weird teenage boys taking off their shirts, jumping up on the cars with their wiffle ball bats. I'm a big Beastie Boys fan. So as soon as I hear the word wiffle ball bat, I think of that Paul Revere song and those lyrics. And it's, kind of X-rated. But what I didn't know until Shan's Live the other night when I Googled it is that in the Urban Dictionary, that's like the definition of wiffle ball bat now, is tied into the Beastie Boys and that song, because they were so popular and still are so popular. And wiffle ball bat is like a metaphor for a Johnson. We'll just call it a Johnson. A schlong. Wiffle ball bat is metaphorical for sexcapades, basically. So when that story is told, like, you also have to ask yourself, like, why did these teenage boys take wiffle ball bats out into the woods? That's kind of weird. So it's also metaphorical for like play fighting, sword fighting, which, if you don't know what a sword fight is in teenage lingo, I'd refer you to the movie Heathers, and I just can't talk about it. I hate that stuff. Like, I'm not a prude. I just don't like people being violated. That's all. Is there a problem with that? Does that make me a prude? It's disgusting, and I don't like the way it gets so normalized. I agree about Elsa saying Kiely fell in a hole. Yes, I believe Kiely was trying to leave and they didn't let her. Right. And no, it does not, Anna B says. And why was there such a delay in that story coming out? I think it took them a while to cook that story up. And then they were like, okay, now we have the story. How are we going to get it into the narrative? Okay, you go out and pretend to interview with some little YouTuber, and then they'll eat it up. And then Megan will go out, MC Ultra, and she'll bolster the story and say, yeah, it's all true and valid because I say so. And, my daddy is Mr. Big. What did she call him? Big Daddy? What's his nickname? Big D? Tenacious D? Is that it? There's something really whack. And what, MC Ultra was in her 40s, and she's like, don't tell my father. My father doesn't know. It's like, girl, you're in your freaking 40s. You have 2 grown ass kids. Why do you care what your daddy knows and doesn't know? Big D Ninja. I was just talking about how good you are at breaking crap down. Okay, so jumping back into the Martha Moxley case, one of the many reasons that I think that I know that Michael Skakel is 1,000% guilty of the crime is that he had the audacity to address Martha Moxley's mother in court to her face, which you should never do. It doesn't matter if you're in a car accident trial. You should never talk to the opposing party. Like, you can say hi in the hallway, but even that will make your lawyer cringe. You just don't do it. So Skakel took the liberty to address Martha Moxley's mother. I think it was somewhere around 2016, 2018. He was convicted in about 2002. The minute he was arrested, before he was even convicted, his wife divorced his hiney. That tells you a lot. And that is never mentioned on any of these newscasts or historical accounts of what had happened. The documentaries, they always leave that part out. Anyway, he addressed Martha Moxley's mother, Dorothy Moxley, who passed away, I think, a week ago today. And I only found that out a couple of days ago after I'd already done my live that day. So yesterday was the first video that I'd made since I happened upon that information. And why isn't that being broadcast? I say that that's information that's being suppressed because Kennedy's. So he went up to Dorothy Moxley and got right in her face and said, "You have the wrong guy. You have the wrong guy. First of all, show some respect. This woman has not just a deceased child, but a brutally assaulted child. They say she wasn't violated, but her pants were pulled down. Of course she was violated. And there was semen in the grass, which, he had a cover story for that too, about climbing up the tree and whacking off and being a peeping Tom earlier that night, right? That's how his DNA got there, because they had the DNA, even though it was 1975, they didn't test it until the 90s when, O.J. Simpson's trial, but they held on to it. And he always knew that they had it. So they still have it. Again, Kennedy's and Skakel's are even more of a royalty than Kennedy's. So he's a Skakel. So when Michael Skakel said that to Dorothy Moxley, you don't need to say that to somebody. Let your lawyer prove it, right? In the court of law. The lawyers for the prosecution had already proven that he was guilty. He'd already served time in prison. This was when the case was overturned and then it was upheld. So he was basically reconvicted. You have the wrong guy. So unless he was there, how would he know, A, that it was a guy, and B, that it was one guy? Why not say, I didn't have anything to do with it? If you're going to be that a-hole that goes and talks to the victim's mother, saying you have the wrong guy, to me, says that for a fact it was a guy, and for a fact it was one guy, because it was you, and you were there, and you were a witness to it. And I said it before, and I'll say it again, because I don't think it gets addressed often enough. He was probably so drunk, which I think he was pretty much every day at 15. I think a lot of the people in his family were, including his dad. And the rage. He had so much rage about losing his mother. He had so much rage towards his older brother, Tommy. And Martha and Tommy were a thing. They were making out that night. It's my guess that he happened upon them and that he attacked the two of them, and that Tommy got away and Martha tried and didn't. And then he had his way with her. and probably post-mortem. Oh, sorry, I didn't do the, you know, let's go back. Sorry, I really am sorry. Let's go back and do the trigger warning, big time trigger warnings. I really apologize for that. It seems to me, since she was already messing around with his brother, that there's no way in hell she was going to mess around with him right after. And how else did his DNA get on the grass right next to her? And when he was attacking her, he probably assaulted her right after he bludgeoned her with the golf club. And then my guess, again, trigger warning, my guess is that after he pleasured himself, it's so gross, then he broke that golf club, because that golf club was intentionally broken. It didn't just break from him bludgeoning her. That's not possible. He broke the golf club to make a sharp object, and then he impaled her neck. And I haven't said how he impaled her neck. It's not covered in a lot of these shows. Again, things get scrubbed, things get whitewashed. Trigger warning. She was impaled in the neck this way. So there was no way in hell she was going to survive. She was already done. She was already deceased when he did that. But he had already done what you call overkill prior to that. And then he went further. And again, he was probably in such a blitzed out, drunken rage. Maybe it was the first time he had intercourse. Maybe, I don't know, 15. But I've always figured that he's probably got PTSD about it too. Not that I have any sympathy or empathy for him, because I don't. I have zero. If he would confess to it and just suffer the consequences, right? Let's get to that stuff with the consequential things. What happened to my other notebook? I've got my phone here. Sorry, when I have too many notebooks and then there's always one missing. That's the one from yesterday. And then I've got this. And yeah, information is only going to be scrubbed if it's extremely relevant, in my opinion, right? So I want to break down again the social media posts that the president-elect made about Carter and the disrespect that he has for him, and where it really shows, let alone his lack of grammar skills. And I'm not the grammar police. I don't know my grammar that well either, but I do know when you say me and when you say I. So we'll hit that point first. It was at the end of the second one. And here we go. So there were the two statements. I do not like the way this is written. The second statement starts with this sentence. This is the whole sentence. You know, it's like 10 words. President Jimmy Carter is dead at 100 years of age, period. So the first 5 words are President Jimmy Carter is dead. Like, people already know that. You're not the news. You're not the authority. That information has already been released. What a ice cold way to start a quote unquote tribute. Okay, the very last sentence of this second social media post on Truth Social. Warmest condolences from Melania and I to his wonderful family. When I read it yesterday to you guys, I said, first off, I don't think that there is a Melania and I anymore. I don't think she has anything to do with him. His own daughter won't have anything to do with him. His ex-wife, his baby mama, won't have anything to do with him because she's not alive. Because when she passed away, the day before the three of Trump Jr., and Ivanka were scheduled to start their depositions, when their mother passed away the day before, those depositions were taken off the table for an indefinite period of time. They did get them done. Those are the depositions that are still causing him some of the biggest problems legally. And we know he has a lot of problems legally. But that whole thing with committing fraud, financial fraud, is one of the biggest problems for being able to even be a candidate on the Republican ticket this last fall. So warmest condolences from Melania and I to his wonderful family. When I was in 9th grade, I had an amazing, grammar instructor in my 9th grade English literature teacher, Mrs. Honey. She was so sweet. Her name was literally Mrs. Honey. And she was so cute. Her whole family was so cute. Love Mrs. Honey. She taught me so much. So the way she broke it down was, when you're saying something like, my dog and I, or me and my dog, the way you figure out, do I use me or I, is you take the other one out of it. And then you just use what you're referring to yourself with and see if it sounds right. Warmest condolences from I to his wonderful family. That don't sound right to me. Warmest condolences from me and Melania to his wonderful family. So what that shows me is that he's trying to sound all formal and educated, because, we try to use I properly when you're not supposed to say me. But it's kind of funny when people don't know how to use me properly and then misuse I. So, not to be nitpicky, but I just think this guy is a jerk, and I don't think he's intelligent. I don't think that he even has an IQ, let alone a genius IQ of 156 or whatever the F the freaking internet says. So let's read the rest of this, because this is where it's so insulting when he uses the phrase very consequential, meaning we're still suffering the consequences of the Carter administration. Believe me, that's exactly what he's getting at. So I'm going to read the whole thing again. This is the second one, and I'm okay with it, but trigger warning for everyone. Yeah, thank you. And, Big D, Tenacious D, is also what we could call this guy, the Donald. So I'm just going to run through it real quick from start to finish. Again, second post on his social media. President Jimmy Carter is dead at 100 years of age. While I strongly disagreed with him philosophically and politically, I also realized that he truly loved and respected our country and all it stands for. He worked hard to make America a better place. And for that, I give him my highest respect. He was a truly good man, and of course, will be greatly missed. He was also very consequential, far more than most presidents after he left the Oval Office. Warmest condolences from Melania and I to his wonderful family. Okay, he was also very consequential. He was truly a good man. Tenacious D, everybody knows that. Everybody knows he was a good man. You know what his quote that he's most famous for, the thing that made him happiest in his entire life, the thing that he was most proud of doing, was that he always told the truth. Imagine that from a politician. So, yeah, he was also very consequential. That really rubbed me the wrong way yesterday, but it wasn't until looking up the definition of the word. You never use that word in a positive sense. Consequential has negative connotations to it. And sure, you can argue with me, but I think we all know that's true. So this was the first statement that he had posted an hour earlier. I just heard the news about the passing of President Jimmy Carter. And then Next sentence is all about Tenacious D. Those of us who have been fortunate to have served as president understand this is a very exclusive club, and only we can relate to the enormous, why didn't he say ginormous, responsibility of leading the greatest nation in history. Okay, another peeve I have, I told you guys my peeve about people reusing the same word too many times, too close together. Capitalizing things that aren't capitalized. Greatest nation and history are all capitalized. I didn't even notice that until just now. I mean, this man capitalizes everything. You're lucky that the whole thing's not in caps. But when he capitalizes words that have no business being capitalized, it's nuts, isn't it? Greatest nation and history. Okay. Yeah, we know that the people that serve as president, it's not a lot. I mean, there's only been 46 presidential terms, and some of those have been served by the same person, like the one that might be coming up. It might not. I mean, there are so many things that could prevent that from happening, and people behind the scenes are very fearful of another insurrection if they don't do what the freaking angry toddler is demanding. So I'm going to read the rest of his thing here because it's short and it's worth discussing a little bit further. The challenges Jimmy faced as a president is a little too casual for me. How about Mr. Carter or President Carter? The challenges President Carter faced in his term came at a pivotal time. But no, he says the challenges Jimmy faced as president came, and he capitalized president there, which you wouldn't in real life. Unless you go to the Trump school, right? President came at a pivotal time for our country. He did not capitalize country. Now I'm getting upset. He did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. It was a pivotal time. I think what I see between the lines here as being a jab rather than a tribute is he's saying as great of an effort that Jimmy made, he couldn't do what needed to be done. That's what I see. I'll read it again. You can tell me if you think I'm being judgmental here. The challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Melania and I are thinking warmly of the Carter family, and there he used it accurately, because you would say, if you didn't have a second person in there, you would say, I am thinking warmly of the Carter family. So that's, don't need no grammar police there. Thinking warmly of the Carter family and their loved ones during this difficult time. This last sentence really pisses me off. We urge everyone to keep them in their hearts and prayers. Why would that piss me off? Somebody could say, but that's a nice thing to say, to urge everyone to keep them in their hearts and prayers. Because first of all, even as a president, you don't have the authority to tell people how to pray and how to love. You just don't. That's separation of church and state. Seriously, to me, that's just sick. And then saying we urge everyone to keep them in their hearts and prayers. Is he going to try to take credit for people caring about the Carter family? Because I'm pretty sure that most Americans and most people around the world already keep the Carters in the highest esteem. I'm fully aware that there's a bunch of MAGA people who don't and think that these words were far too nice for Tenacious D to put out on his social media about one of the greatest presidents we've ever had. And I'd say arguably the greatest president we've ever had. So I say he was a great president because I'm pretty sure none of the hostages passed away. There were hostages that didn't make it home alive because of like a air crash that happened. And I think there were 8 Americans that passed away in that, and 1 Iranian, I think. But to say that he was a very consequential president, in a sense, tells me that there's blame on that president for the war in Iraq all the way up to present time. Okay, I'm not going to read it anymore. But yeah, Carter only served a single term, as everybody knows. And to be someone that was voted out in the running for that incumbent seat, to have been voted out and still be held in such high regard. And we know that the hostages were released like the minute Reagan was inaugurated. Like that was a coordinated effort. That was a conspiracy. There, I'll use that C word. So sad. My deepest condolences for President Carter's family. Yeah, it's sad whenever a life is lost, even when it's from natural causes and the person has lived a glorious, happy, and fulfilling life with leaving a legacy behind. You really can't ask for more, though. Like, that's leaving a legacy behind is like the icing on the cake, is it not? Carter was an outstanding human, unlike the man behind the curtain. Anna Bees. Yeah, and I know that there's people who will watch this video and say, oh, I'm done with that channel because, how dare her. And I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with you expressing your opinion. I'm absolutely fine with losing viewers to me putting my honest opinions out there. I think it's really important to not be scared to put your honest opinions out in public. And the fear mongering is so much a part of the whole thing with MAGA. And it's hideous. It's disgusting. And I hope I'm wrong, but if he gets sworn in, if he gets inaugurated on the 20th, it's going to be very consequential, to use his own word. Very consequential, in my opinion. I can't imagine anything worse for democracy. So some people are saying online, I'm not the person that came up with this, although I did come up with it on my own before I saw it online, but I won't try to take credit, is that the flags that will be flying at half-mast for 30 days all across the country, all government flags will be flying at half-mast for 30 days in honor of President Jimmy Carter. So that will be until I think around the 30th of January. And we know that the inauguration is on the 20th. So for the first week or week and a half of the Angry Orange's second term, the flags will be at half-mast. And in my opinion, that signifies the death of democracy. And I sure hope that he gets blocked. I sure hope that the House and the Senate have the balls, the cojones to stand up to this monster, because we have to face it. If Mike Pence didn't stand up to him, he still probably would have been hung that day. I mean, they wanted him because he was standing up to him, but in a mob mentality and with all the confusion. But I was not a fan of Mike Pence at all. He was one of my least favorite people on the planet until that day. I was so impressed with him and his commitment to his job and to democracy, that he stood his ground. And, I'm very grateful to him. I'm very grateful to all of the law enforcement that fought the mob that day. Many of them lost their lives, if not from their physical injuries, from their psychological injuries. They haven't even ever said how many passed away by self-deletion afterwards. We know that there was a handful that passed away from self-deletion immediately after, in the days following. And there were quotes from some of them saying, people that had fought in, hand-to-hand combat in the war, that it was way worse than that, because it was the people that you were fighting for in war that were doing this to you. It's absolutely incorrigible. Yeah, it's supposed to be a free people. Yeah, I mean, freedom, we're not free to say some things. We're not free to make threats. And, that's very reasonable. I mean, you can't make it a free for all across the boards. But freedom of speech is extremely important. It's one of the cornerstones of our democracy. And when there's threats against journalists, when journalists are taken out, when journalists have their lives threatened, when journalists are so scared that they go running to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring just days after they called the guy the H word, that's just dangerous for everybody. Like I have such issue with Mika and Joe Scarborough. I know Mika has a different last name, but that couple from MSNBC, I have no respect for them. Like, they made asses of themselves, and they put everybody in a dangerous predicament, in my opinion. And I understand, I empathize with their feeling so vulnerable and endangered. But you know what? You gotta be true to yourself. If you're not true to yourself and true to your higher power, you ain't got nothing. So I think I should kick the soapbox out from under my butt right now and get back on track with talking true crime, because it's hard to keep it separate. I was trying, since I started my channel, I've always tried to keep the politics out of my true crime channel. And then, this last few months, I just felt like the politics and true crime were having a head-on collision, and it just wasn't possible anymore, because to me, there's so much crime in the politics right now. The justices that were sworn into the Supreme Court, I was going to get off the soapbox, right? But yeah, the powers that be that can exercise the law in the 14th Amendment, Section 3, if they don't exercise that law, then it's just like all the whistleblower laws that are useless, that don't have any teeth, because they don't get used. They don't get put into play. Like, laws don't just happen on their own. People with their blood, sweat, and tears have to apply the law. I mean, that's what police officers do. People don't just automatically get arrested like voila with a magic wand. There's people that have to wrestle those people to the ground sometimes tase them, sometimes worse. And sometimes they get attacked and assaulted in the process. So, the laws of the court are the same way. They do not get utilized on their own. They don't just magically apply. You have to apply the law, and you have to have the intelligence to know the law. You have to have the intelligence to know how to apply it. And then you have to have the cojones to actually do it. And if you don't, then you're breaking the law too. So one last thing I should say about all this before I really hop off the soapbox is that when you are an officer of the law, or when you're in the military, you guys probably all know this. If you're given illegal orders, like Pence was given illegal orders back on the day of the insurrection, if you follow those illegal orders, you will be court-martialed. You will suffer the consequences of your actions. If you do the right thing and the legal thing, you're going to be protected. You're not going to, you can't say, well, my boss told me to do this, so I had to do it. You can't. If your boss is telling you to do illegal things, like say with law enforcement, they're supposed to use the least amount of force possible to get the job done. If they're exercising their force to the highest capacity that they feel like to get the job done, that's illegal. Even if their supervisor tells them, just do it, just beat the person, just do it because, we're sick of this. You're not allowed to break the law no matter what. So, that's where war crimes come into play. And it puts the soldiers, it puts the officers in a very dangerous predicament. But they have to be able to think for themselves, and they have to be able to make life and death decisions in the blink of an eye. And for that, we can thank them and respect them a great deal for doing the job the best to their ability. So I'm hopping off the soapbox, I promise. We're almost an hour in. Let's see. So I was speaking about Ken Littleton yesterday a great deal. The tutor that was hired and moved in to the Skakel house on the same day as the tragedy, the bludgeoning of Martha Moxley. So he was interviewed extensively the next day. He had never, I don't think he'd ever heard her name. I don't think he ever met her. I don't think he ever saw her. So, the type of violence that was done was, it was basically a crime of passion. It was obvious that whoever did this knew this person and had very strong feelings about what they were doing. So it would make sense for everybody to be a suspect, right? Especially the new guy that you don't know. But it was so sad. He was 23 years old. He had a college degree. He'd just gotten hired at the very prestigious private school that the Skakel boys all went to, the Skakel daughter as well. Or she had gone there. She was probably all graduated. Yeah, because Tommy was 17, so he would have been about a junior or a senior. And Michael was 15, so he would have been probably somewhere around 10th grade-ish. And the other 5 children were all grown. Like, how many of them even lived there? I actually don't know. That's an interesting thought. See, that's why I love doing these lives, because I think of these things on the spot. How many of the Skakel brothers lived there at that time? How many of them were there that night? Because there was the whole story about how a bunch of kids got into a car and drove over to a cousin's house. And then there's been stories over the years that William Kennedy Smith was there. He was 15, just like Michael and Martha. And maybe he was there. Maybe that's been whitewashed and scrubbed. I don't know. We do know that he's got a pretty terrible history as well. And then, I would like to know the whereabouts of RFK Jr. that night. I really would, because he was in college. He was probably about 23 at the time. I think he was like 7 years older than Tommy. So he would have been close to the same age as Ken Littleton. And he did then go to law school. He was quite the party animal. He was quite the ladies' man. He loved animals. That's why he chops off whale heads and skins bears and drops them in the Central Park. He's always been an outdoor enthusiast and animal lover. And I'm trying to remember where he went to college. I honestly don't remember. Like, I would think Harvard, but I don't remember. I'd have to look it up. And I could, but I won't. I am angry. with Democrats for not having more balls. Anna, I'm so glad you said that. I've been angry since this whole election aftermath started, because there was obviously so much interference with Musk buying people's information, basically putting them in that $1 million lottery if he could have all their personal information, so then they could possibly win $1 million. And just, the Starlink thing that he owns has interfered with other elections in other countries. And Putin has essentially made statements taking credit for meddling with our election this last time around. So to not be extremely thorough, what they call election hygiene, to not be extremely thorough and be 100% sure that there was no funky business, because in my opinion, there was all kinds of funky business. I mean, a lot of people were afraid to leave their houses to go vote, if they were like obviously trans or obviously not white. There were a lot of areas like that. I live in the state of Ohio, where there was a sheriff who asked a pollster to write down the addresses of people who had Harris signs in their yards and people who didn't vote for Trump at the early election. And that sheriff was told not to do that, but he didn't suffer any consequences. It was not a consequential illegal thing that he said and did. But that, me being in Ohio, that made me afraid to go and vote early. Like, I almost didn't go vote early. I usually do vote early, but I was just like, I don't want them coming to my house. And I did finally go and vote early, and it relieved so much anxiety. I was so happy to cast my ballot. But isn't one of the things that that MAGA wants is to take away voting rights from women and take away voting rights from everybody except white men? I mean, I guess I should retitle this live Handmaid's Tale. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you guys, I just happened to read Margaret Atwood's very first novel called The Edible Woman when I was a teenager, and I was being bad and I was trying to read like a trashy romance novel, and I thought, aha, The Edible Woman. It was at my house. My mom had it, and I was like, I'm reading it. No one's going to stop me. And I read it, and I was just like, It wasn't at all what I thought it was. It was Margaret Atwood. It was like the precursor to Handmaid's Tale. Like, she'd written a lot. She was a prolific writer, but that was her first novel, The Edible Woman. And it was essentially about a woman that was engaged to her boyfriend to be married, and she was freaking out and having a meltdown. And so she made a cake of herself. And this was before, Cake Boss. This was before people were doing that type of thing in the 70s. She made a cake of herself. Her fiance came over to her house, and she shoved it in his face, and she told him to eat it. And he didn't want to. And she forced him to eat it. I think it's been, 40 years since I read the book. She was just like, that's what you want to do. That's what your plan is. So just eat it. So the engagement was off, needless to say. And it just blew my mind. I was like, what a weirdo. Like, who is this Margaret Atwood? Like, what is she thinking? But as I've aged another 40 years since I read it, I was utterly perplexed. I was just creeped out. I totally understand where she was coming from. People, our children, our spouses, our societies expect a lot from us, and they take and they take and they take, and they just want more. And when we want something back, we're told that we're selfish or something like that. I don't know. So, fast forward 20 years to The Handmaid's Tale, that made such an impact on our culture. And at the time that it was written, it was so far-fetched. It was so far-fetched. I mean, for those who don't know the basic storyline, it's, the elite, like the Kennedys, are running the country. And all of the women have to cover their bodies and their faces, and they have to wear those red cloaks with the white things so that no one can see what they look like. And the wealthy white women that are married to the elites, those are the masters. So the husband and wife of these rich elite society, the upper crust, those are the masters. And everybody else is basically a slave. And the handmaids are the young, beautiful, usually beautiful, right? The young women that are used as breeders. And they are violated with the assistance of the wife. The wife helps violate the handmaid so that she can be a surrogate for having a baby with the types of genes that they want. So they can basically shop which handmaid they want to reproduce with. So, it kind of like leans towards cloning and things like that. It leans towards a lot of things, but the point is that it's kind of like the apocalypse for everybody except the upper crust. And people, it's like the complete opposite of a free society. People are not allowed to move around freely. It's not a free market. Their living arrangements and survival arrangements are extremely scarce. Basically, it's like everybody's living in prison except for the masters. And like I said, when that book came out, it was thought of as pretty out there. Like, people first thought Margaret Atwood was a weirdo. Like, why is she thinking like this? That's impossible. And she's very articulate, so she did a lot of public speaking, like, going to LaSalle University. DeSales, I think it's called DeSalle, the one that Koberger went to. He's allegedly sitting there in the front seat with his little book on his lap, and he's like all excited, and she's hovering over his shoulder, and it's a book signing maybe, or just a public speaking event. She was there. She was at DeSales University during the time that he was a student there. However, even if that's him in the photograph, which I don't think it is, I think it's his head is like cut and pasted on. It doesn't fit the body correctly. And even if it was him and it was a real picture with him with his little Handmaid's Tale copy and the author there, why don't we see pictures of him at other book signing events of other books and other authors and other events, like, birthday parties, Christmas, Thanksgiving, hanging out, going to the movies? There's just no photographs of him except that and a couple other, like very few. And I find that highly suspect. Like there's one photo of him from a wedding, right? One photo of him from a wedding. Was that the only wedding he ever went to? Was that the only photograph that anybody ever took of him at a wedding? I mean, come on. It's so obvious to me that they're trying to distort his image. And so many of these cases in true crime just seem to me like they are contrived and they're like social experiments. And that might sound pretty out there and a little whack, but think about that whole Idaho 4 case. For them to say that it took 8 hours for the frozen shock phase to wear off and for 911 to be called. For them to say that Dylan was on the second floor, when they said that both of the two that survived because they were on the first floor, right? That they were like unknown. They were like hidden away in a different part of the house. And then the PCA comes out 6 weeks later with Dylan being on the second floor and basically coming face to face with the eyebrows. And then the whole thing with the latent shoe print, like latent means that the shoe print was cleaned up. Who cleaned up the shoe print? And how come only one? Don't most people have two shoes when they're making shoe prints? I mean, it's a joke, you guys. It's an absolute joke. All the whole story, like the front door being open. Of course, the front door was open. The smell of the red stuff would have been enough to probably make anybody vomit and make anybody hurl. It would have been like suffocating. And heat would have been on because it was like 25 degrees out that night, you guys. I've looked it up many times. It did not get warmer than 28 degrees that night. So heat would have been on, making that stuff cook and circulate. It would have reeked to high heavens in there the second you cracked the door open. So yeah, they left the door open so that air could get in. And so the dog was running around. But how was the dog running around in the morning, way after the fact, but the dog wasn't running around maybe during the unaliving event? Because that dog, as dogs so often do, the story behind the dog can crack the case. Like, it could be that the dog was friendly with its owner. It could be that its owner was there helping corral it. But if it was in that room the way the PCA says that it was, somebody put it in that room after it was running around in the morning. And there were eyewitnesses who said that the door was open for like 45 minutes or something, like around 8:30, 9 o'clock. And again, it's 28 degrees out. You know, it's probably still below freezing at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that doesn't make any sense to leave your door open for close to an hour. Anna Bees says, okay, I'm back to your comment, the last one that I highlighted. I'm angry with the Democrats for not having more balls. Yeah, I think that they just rolled over way too easy from jump. They're like, oh, we don't want to be like election deniers because that's what MAGA did and they're bad. We're going to behave. We're going to be good. There's been so much going on that I forgot about Musk doing that. I know, Anna Bees, we all forget about everything, self included, because we're so freaking gaslit. We can't keep up with this stuff. It's coming at us a million miles an hour. It's just hitting us in the head again and again. Yeah. Elon is interfering with democracy big time. And the whole thing with Doge, I mean, all they want to do is save all the money that the government spends on, frivolous things like education and people's retirement and medical care. Cancel all that so that we have a few more $1 trillion to line our own pockets with. Legally, I'm sure legally, right? They'll come up with some business scheme. I mean, they're just a bunch of scammers and grifters, in my opinion. And yeah, to even think about canceling the Department of Education is freaking nuts. To even think about installing Matt Gaetz into your cabinet is freaking nuts. I don't think I've told you guys more than once or twice. My grandfather was in the Kennedy administration. He was one of Kennedy's selections for his cabinet. And my grandfather was a staunch Republican. The Kennedys are staunch Democrats. I don't know if that's really a term. But when it comes to serving your country, that stuff goes out the window. It doesn't matter who's a freaking Democrat and who's a freaking Republican. You're all in it together and you respect each other. And that's what we've lost. Like, I've never seen such like civil war and just like the threats of civil war constantly. Like, is that what's going to happen if there's not an inauguration? Or is that what's going to happen if there is an inauguration? I mean, it's sort of a catch-22. If the inauguration is blocked, we fear that will happen. If the inauguration is not blocked, we fear that will happen because it's their way or the highway. And that's not a democracy. That's fascism, straight up. trying to stay off the political soapbox, but it's really hard. I mean, this year has been quite exhausting, really. I mean, it's just a pile of crap, in my humble opinion. I live in a very red area, Anna B says. Thank you so much for carrying the whole chat, Anna B. You and C3PO, I really appreciate it. We do have 4 other people watching. We have 11 likes. That's lovely, lovely. Such a tiny channel, but it's okay. Small but mighty, hopefully. I mean, I just am trying to do the right thing for myself, and hopefully it's helpful for other people. I live in a very red area, as do I. I get a lot of stares, but there was no drama. Yeah. It's rough. It's weird. Honestly, when the Tenacious D first was elected, I was very unhappy about it, but I also was trying to suspend my judgment. I thought, just because I don't like him, just because I don't like things that he's done, he's never been in politics. He's never been a president. So let's see what he does. And it was like worse than I could have imagined, in my opinion, the whole way through, all the way up to the bitter end. And man, was it bitter. I mean, I really felt like I'd been assaulted when Brian Sicknick passed away, you guys. I really felt like that could have been my husband in that job. My husband's law enforcement. DC is my original hometown. I could have easily tried to talk him into moving there at some point. And, I've thought about it. I talked him into moving to Ohio from Seattle because he's from Seattle. And yeah, the day that happened, I was just like, thank God we don't live in DC. Thank God that wasn't him. But that type of thing can happen in any state. And it seemed like it was going to back then. It seemed like there was going to be more of it, but fortunately there wasn't. But anyway, my point is that it is important to not prejudge. And I like to be proven wrong in situations where I'm thinking that the outlook is so grim. I really like to be proven wrong. I don't have a hang up of being incorrect in a situation like that. It's fantastic. Idaho 4 is very sus. I thought I only had 5 to 7 years until retirement. Oh my goodness, I know. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, even right after the election, the billionaires, all of their bank accounts multiplied, is my understanding. I do watch a lot of mainstream news media to try to hear what's going on the other side of the world, the other side of politics. Now I'm worried I won't be able to retire. This year has been so difficult. Yeah. And we're at the end of it. So hopefully 2025 will be better. I hope to be wrong. I thought you were going to say, I hope you're wrong. I would take no offense. I hope I'm wrong too. Yeah, I mean, I hope that justice is exercised. I hope that laws are enacted. I hope that our country remains a democracy. MC3PO says, I'm still here. Yeah, we're all still here. So I do think I'm going to wind down. It's been 1 hour and 20. I love you guys. Thanks so much for being a part of my little podcast here. I hope that you have a really good rest of your day. I hope you have a really good rest of the year. Make sure you eat your fruits and veggies and your protein and stay hydrated and get some exercise and fresh air and sunshine. Most importantly, just be you. Relax, be happy, take care of yourself. Do you like my necklaces? I haven't been talking about my jewelry lately. I've been too busy talking about true crime and politics. So this is one of my favorite earrings that I made a while ago. They're just kind of simple, a nice mossy green, which is one of my favorite colors. The top part is jade, and I think the bottom part is fluorite. Very simple, and I love them. And I'll get closer so you guys can see my necklaces. I don't think I made any of the necklaces I have on. You've seen all these necklaces before, but It's the first time I've ever worn them layered together in honor of Kylie Rodney and her 3 necklaces. So this one you've seen, it's Firefly. I have to take it off so you can get a really close look because the detail is amazing. The brand is Firefly. And can you see it? It's so cute. It's like tiny little beads. And then the back is even detailed. Just it's so intricate. The back kind of looks like a beetle or something. Is that so freaking cool? I love this brand, Firefly. There, try to get it so you can get a good view of the intricacy. And then even like the findings, the clasp is all cool and decorative. This one is all real gemstones, citrine in the middle, and then rubies, and then I think peridot between. Yeah, it is. It's little green peridot between the big citrine and the um, rubies. So, is the green between them, or is it on the outside? It's kind of hard to see. Anyway, I love it. It's kind of like a flower, like a daisy. And then this one is alexandrite. This darker stone up here is alexandrite, which is really, really, really hard to find. It's extremely rare. And then this one, is it called, it's not laborite. That's a different one. That's what this ring is. No, this ring is labradorite. But this stone is from not Puerto Rico, but somewhere down there, right? Is it Puerto Rico? It's like the only place in the world where it's found. It's somewhere down by the Caribbean. And a friend of mine went down there and brought it. No, she brought me back some earrings. This necklace I think I got at one of my favorite jewelry stores, actually. So enough showing off my jewelry. And do you guys like the evolution of the lights in here? I love it. This is kind of cool, huh? Like all the ivy and plants and stuff. It's kind of like where the wild things are. Because, I'm pretty wild like that. We love you, Jazz. Oh, you're so sweet. We need to celebrate and hope for the best. I like your necklaces. You are too sweet, Annabees. Yeah, I mentioned yesterday, like just kind of tongue in cheek, like, oh, sometimes I just want to give up on this whole thing. Of course, sometimes that crosses your mind when you're frustrated and, things are just, everything that's going wrong can go wrong. But I hope I never give up on this. I tell the little story of when I started back with Kylie Rodney's case at the end of August of 2022. I was hoping that if I started my own channel that I could try to do recording videos every day for like 2 years, because I thought it's going to be really challenging. I've never made content. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not real technologically inclined. And yeah, from the ground up, I was pretty much lost. And I thought, I'm just going to have to like put my nose on the grindstone and just try to kick some ass and see if it sticks. And I thought after 2 years, I'll decide if I'm going to move forward with it or not. So it's been 2.5 years. Planning on moving forward. I kind of feel like I've barely gotten started. So, I do have big dreams to think that I can eventually just do this for my career. I mean, who knows? If not, that's cool too. It's a wonderful hobby. Absolutely a wonderful hobby. I love it. And I couldn't do it without you guys, because you do need a lot of encouragement, even if you're not getting paid financially, which maybe I will someday, maybe I won't. I might be setting up a GoFundMe for the puppy dog, because her cancer treatment is extremely expensive, and we've already kind of been cleaned out with all the other cancer treatment up until now. So we're at the beginning of something that's probably going to cost another 10,000. And, again, if that's our biggest problem, how lucky are we, right? So I am, I do have some Cash App things in my description somewhere. I never talk about them. So if you wanted to support the channel financially, that would be much appreciated. And the membership thing, that helps support the channel financially, if and when YouTube ever sends me my first check, which they will. I'm not the type to give up. You know that. Um, and so they're just racking up a bill with me. But I mean, it's not that big. It's probably under $400 what they owe me at this point. Um, and then the other thing is that GoFundMe. So yeah, I'm thinking that I might have a GoFundMe for cancer treatment for the dog, for Coco. If you want to contribute, and if you don't have the ability or you don't want to, still cool. I still love you anyway. I don't even like to ask for that kind of thing, but you know, money makes the world go around, right? We got to do what we got to do. Happy New Year again. It's 4 o'clock on, what day is it today? Tuesday? December 31st, 2024. Can you believe it's 2025 almost at midnight? Wow. So I hope that you have a lovely rest of 2024 and a fabulous send off to 2025. Peace out, you guys. Love and light. Take care and thank you for watching. Oh, and the funny ring, do you love it? It's like from the 70s. It's just plastic. I've got a couple of these. I absolutely love them. They're not originals from the 70s. I got them more recently, but I remember having them when I was 9 years old. Prayers for Coco. Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Anna Bees, C3PO. Light and love. See you soon. See how it goes tomorrow in stream. Again.